Hello and welcome to Audiobook Reviews. This is a review of the third and final book in the First Law trilogy, Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. Now, I do want to preface before I get started because I feel like this review is going to be a little divisive, possibly. I did very much enjoy this book and very much enjoyed the series. It was fantastic and sucked me in more than anything has in quite a while. Joe Abercrombie, fantastic. The way he writes characters, the way he just tells a story, it makes it feel so very real, and you really, really do get pulled in. I most certainly will be reading the standalone novels and then getting to a little hatred as the new book as well in the next series. So definitely will be continuing to read. That said, I did find Last Argument of Kings a little underwhelming for me. Now, I'll get into spoilers here shortly, but just to kind of review my previous videos, when I did the first book, The Blade itself, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was very engaging, but I commented it just felt like not a lot had really happened. So it was a book that it was satisfying, but it just kind of needed a little bit more. Going into book two, before they're hanged, it seemed to pick up dramatically. There was a lot of action, a lot of big scenes. It really, really made me excited to read Last Argument of Kings. Now, I enjoyed Last Argument of Kings, but it just kind of felt like it stepped back a little bit toward the blade itself, where it was still very good. It was still very engaging. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it just kind of was missing that little extra, I suppose, is what's happening there. And some of it, I think, has honestly because of the fact that the books were written very well. There are a lot of things coming to fruition in Last Argument of Kings, and there are some things, I don't know if they were fully supposed to be plot twists, but a lot of it you just kind of see coming in general. It's one of those things where part of it's because you just kind of feel like you know what the characters are going to do based on how they're written. There's not a departure from that, which some authors might try to do, might try to have some big plot twist, and then we'd be having the discussion of that doesn't really fit the character. The things that happen, they fit the character, they make sense, and so you kind of feel like you know what's going to happen based on knowing these characters so well. So it's a little ironic that a positive, one of the biggest positives of the way Joe Abercrombie writes the characters, actually made the ending a little less exciting because you just kind of, oh yeah, of course that's going to happen. That makes sense. That seemed to be where things were leading. That said, I'm going to jump a little bit more into spoilers. They will range from mild to quite large, so be aware. As always, I will post the timestamp in the description for where you can skip forward to if you do not want to hear the spoilers. So, starting with Jaisal, I commented in the last video, it seemed pretty evident that he was going to be the next king. That continues on pretty quickly with this book. It's a big plot that the king is going to die very soon, then does die. Both of his sons have been murdered. We saw West murder Ladislaw, and we saw the other prince being killed in suspicious circumstances that we'll get into Tish more later as well. And so Jaisal is immediately being set up as a new potential candidate. He finds out that there's all these conflated stories about what he actually did while they were off trying to get the seed, making him sound a hero. Beaz quickly inserts him into a situation where he defends a peasant and so is becoming almost a folk hero. Quickly, then, he's promoted and put in charge of most of the remaining force to stop the revolt of the peasants. This was also mentioned before, that this was a thing that was happening, kind of war on all fronts, and then home with the peasants. And you find out that Beaz had also caused this situation, which once again wasn't really surprising. It fit in with everything that we'd seen happening so far. And so Jaisal, without actually really having to do anything, is able to resolve everything, stop, looks even better, and is just looked at as this extremely favorable person. Through lots of drama, and most of what we see from Glocta is him trying to get votes for the Archlector and other parties trying to get votes the other way. There's this big drama, it's a major plot point of who's going to be the next king. All of it knowing, though, it's definitely going to be Jaisal one way or another. So it's kind of a weird plot line where you know exactly how it's going to end, but they're still trying to build tension for it. But Jaisal does end up becoming king. You find out Beaz has had quite a lot to do with that, which plays into what we hear about him later. But one thing I did really like with Jaisal is you see flashes of him actually trying to be a better person. He's very self-absorbed, egotistical, and has always been very self-important. But he kind of actually realizes that there's more to life than that. He kind of wishes he would have appreciated the things he had, and he does actually attempt to try, even though it doesn't actually necessarily work out. The next character I want to talk about is Logan. I commented previously, book two, Glockta was my favorite character. I really enjoyed his plot lines, but Logan very much became my favorite character overall in the series. And book three had a lot to do with that. It was a huge resolution for Logan, and a lot of the focus I felt was really on him and his arc. Logan was always a fascinating character. I commented before, there was something just amazing about the way we were introduced to Logan. We see him on his own. We never actually see him interact with his band of men in the North, but we get to see how they think about him. Most of this comes from the Dogman, who is his oldest friend and thinks about all the life lessons he's taught. And so we get this kind of nice view of him. And then his other interactions with everybody else, book one, book two, when they're traveling, he's trying to be friendly. He says he wants to be a better man. We hear from him from himself. He's done some bad things, but he wants to be better. We're also told that he is just this cold-blooded killer, this extremely fearsome person, and it is a little bit weird because you're given these two sides, and it makes it all the better when you see the brief flashes of him as the Bloody Nine. You see it in book one and more in book two, but book three, he goes back to the North. We knew that was going to happen. He was going to go back. He was going to finish what he started with Bethod, who the Union and the other Northmen have been fighting. And we really see the full truth of the Bloody Nine, who the Bloody Nine really is, what the Bloody Nine is capable of. In the kind of last stand battle with the Northmen before the Union arrive, we see him kill a small child who was on their side. We see him kill one of his men who's trying to help him, and just really show that he will kill anyone or anything, because when he's the Bloody Nine, there is no room for anything but death, and you really get deeper. You see through finally his interactions with other Northmen too, where they all really do hate and fear him, and even his own men seem to be uncomfortable with him being around. He has to travel with someone whose family he slaughtered, and it really gives you that whole other look. And you realize now why he's been trying so hard to atone, because he really has done all of these terrible things that are just as terrible, if not worse, than he thinks they are. That look into the character and the way it was written was just fascinating and was one of my favorite parts of book three. And also, even though you knew it was going to happen, him coming back to fight with the Northmen, you seeing more of the Bloody Nine, all leading up to that scene I'd been waiting for since the Feared was introduced, and especially after Three Trees fought the Feared, was the Bloody Nine versus the Feared facing off. This magical giant creature who can't feel pain on his tattooed side of his body versus just a man, but not just a man, the Bloody Nine. The scene, even though I knew very early on it was going to come down to that, it was very, very evident that was going to happen, was still very satisfying just to see this person who, while larger than life, is a human man fighting something even more, and of course, coming out triumphantly. Great scene, great to read, and that kind of, for me, resolved Logan's plotline. He defeats the king, he goes and kills Bethod very violently, and is then proclaimed king of the Northmen. That was really his plot, but even him, he just feels like that's not really what he wanted. He didn't want that. That's just the way it ended up. He agrees to go south and help West and help the Union actually fight and attack against the Gurkish, who had invaded the Union during the time where most of their army was up north. So he agrees to go back. You get them coming in, and you have a scene where he's turning into the Bloody Nine. His life is in danger, and there's this huge concussive force, and something is kind of knocked loose in his head. the scene I thought was fantastic because it's not mentioned a whole lot, but he ends up not turning the Bloody Nine, not killing his best and only friend, the Dog Man, who it seemed like he was about to kill. Instead, he is no longer the Bloody Nine. He kind of wakes up out of his fog, and that little piece kind of makes it even more real. Immediately to me, what it makes think of, well, we've seen him headbutting people constantly. Maybe he has this bone fragment in his head that is pressing against the rage center of his brain. And in times of huge stress, when all the endorphins, dopamine coming, it presses and ends up just turning him into the rage monster, kind of gives something even more real. Yes, this is a world where there is magic, but Logan is a man, and even though he is larger than life and does things that should be impossible, something like that where he just doesn't feel pain and nothing but rage is given an actual kind of realistic approach to some extent, makes it even more real, and I found that to be extremely enjoyable. Logan's end after the battle, going up north, he finds out that one of his men, who once again was one of the people who hated him very much as well, he's taken over. You kind of figured he was going to, since he's the one who stuck back around, and he's trying to kill Logan and take over as king. Logan ends up running, jumping out of a window from a high level in the castle and falling toward the river. And it ends up ending the same way the series started. Logan on his own, falling to potentially his death. It's not really made clear if he does live or die, but just blacking out and just thinking to himself. And something about it was absolutely perfect. That ending, it fit the character so well. It was a great ending for the very last words in the series. I mentioned that he went back to fight with West. West is the first character I'll talk about. I just felt like there wasn't really a lot of resolution for him. It was really evident that he was going to be made the new Lord Marshal after the Lord Marshal died, once Jaisal became king. No surprise there. You did get some cool scenes where he's kind of putting the generals against each other. We've seen these two generals who they're actually pretty decent. They hate each other and they're always trying to compete instead of actually focusing on fighting. And so he plays them off one another in a very smart way. You see him kind of taking over, getting his officers in place. There were some good scenes there, but we don't really see a lot of battle with his army. We're just kind of told the battle's over. They go back to fight the Gurkish. We don't see a ton happening there as well. Most of it's already taken place in general, and then falls onto Bayaz. West ends up getting sick and dying due to the seed, which we'll talk about in the Bayaz section as well. And just not a lot happened. And I can get the realism that not every character is going to have this heroic thing that they do, but it did kind of feel like West was not super important in book one, got a lot more important in book two as a character. We were more invested in book three. It just kind of winnowed down. That was something that was a little bit of a problem with some other characters as well. Glokta was my favorite character in book two. Book one, I commented I thought there was potential for the character, and the way the writing of the characters in general is just fantastic, but it was kind of a weird ending for Glokta where he finds out that he's been duped. Book two was him at his full capacity, really going and fighting for his life. It introduced this bank, Valenbach, who gave him all this money and basically said, oh, we're going to blackmail you later, which book three they end up doing. And so he's caught between these two giants, the Archlector, his superior, this bank who can blackmail him. And if they tell the Archlector they gave him all the money, he knows he's going to be killed. He's caught between them. He's trying to get out. He's being given these different orders. Whenever he's trying to do something for the Archlector, he's told, no, you need to investigate the Archlector. And when he tries to do other investigations into the death of the prince that was still in the kingdom, into other things as well, he constantly is told, no, don't do that. And I did honestly think that it was going to end up being the Archlector who was involved with the bank, with some of the other important people, which was not the case. But his arc in general, he's kind of caught between. He does end up marrying West's sister Artie. Also, you could see that was going. He obviously was kind of infatuated with her, and once Jaisal became king, you knew things weren't going to end well. Artie was shown to us as a very unstable character, and it wasn't going to work out in general. You could tell. So to protect her, since you find out she's with child. To protect her, he ends up marrying her. They do give it a little twist where she actually seems like she's gonna try and make it work versus just being woe is me about it. So that was a more interesting way to go about it. I do feel like there was that piece. But Glocta had just kind of winnowed a little bit as well. He does end up being very important. He ends up actually becoming the Archlector after he arrests the Archlector. He finds out this whole plot. The Archlector had been working with the university. They were trying to summon demons. And that plot really didn't add a lot to it, what the Archlector was doing. We knew he was doing something behind the scenes, but I don't know. I felt like they could have put that in a little bit better, made it so that it was more of a insidious plot versus he's just trying to summon demons. The Archlector had shown several times that he knew more about magic and the eaters and these other things than he probably should have for someone in his position, but it just I don't know that it didn't do a whole lot once again to add it. It was kind of stopped at the last second by Glocta, and it was done. That was that piece there. Getting into now actually talking about Bayaz and in turn Pharaoh. Pharaoh, who really did not do a whole lot in this book either. Pharaoh was the biggest character. I felt like just wasn't given a lot in the series. Book one, Pharaoh was not introduced until around the middle. Was just traveling, and then book two, when with all the plot, we find out more about why she's important. You know, she's descended from demons. She's the only one who can hold the seed essentially without dying and allow Bayaz to use it. That's her whole purpose. They don't find it, so they just kind of go back to the Union, and she's just stuck there and is kind of there. Now, Bayaz wants to get a weapon out of the Master Maker's tower. They go back in there, and she discovers the seed there. It was there all along and kind of sets it up. So still important, but besides her allowing Bayaz to use the seed, that's kind of it. Now she does find out it's changed her, and she's going to go off and finally get her revenge on the Gurkish. I imagine that's what Best Served Cold, one of the standalone novels, is about. Haven't read it yet though, but that happens, but just not a lot really happens with her. Her plot was very minimal in book one, very minimal book three. Book two was the one that really everyone pulled together. And with Bayaz, we really get the culmination of what we've been seeing throughout the series, that he is actually a darker character than he lets on. Granted, we've seen his murderous rage a time or two, but that there's more to it. We've had hints that he has shaped history to his liking or lied about things. There is what's brought up, and what his enemy Cluel thinks is that he actually killed their master when they were both under Juvens, and that he caused the war where they ended up going, and he killed the Master Maker Canedius as well. And we get this scene where he's being questioned by Yule and one of the other Magus. Again, did you do it? Oh, like I always ask you. And it feels very forced. Then he comments that instead of what Bayaz said, that the Master Maker threw down his daughter and killed her because it was Bayaz's lover, and then jumped himself or was pushed off by Bayaz or whatever, that he swears the Master Maker fell first. And then all of a sudden it's revealed that Bayaz's apprentice Malachus Kwai has actually been Ptolemy since like book two started, and she was using magic to pretend to be his apprentice, travel with him, and is now revealing herself. It felt forced. It felt unneeded. We already knew Bayaz was pretty dark. We would have believed Bayaz was capable of this and all the things we find out very shortly he's done without this scene. Now, book two did have Kwai really change. He seemed to get a lot quieter, more drawn in. He seemed to hate Bayaz and made some cryptic comments. What I think and what I thought was going to happen, and I think would have worked, was that he learned about all these things that Bayaz did and was going to turn on him. That made sense. It wouldn't have been surprising, whereas this, I guess, was, but the plot twist thrown in here just seemed really disjointed. It seemed shoehorned in to just add something else, maybe because most of the book you really saw things coming, and Abercrombie wanted something that was a surprise. It didn't work for me. I don't think it fit. I don't think it was needed, and it kind of hurt that scene. We find out a lot more about Baez, though, and that he's really been masterminding everything in the Union for thousands of years. He's put kings in, he's created this, he's controlled every little piece of it because he is creating his army, his land, so he can fight Khalul. It's essentially this big chess game between the two of them. Khalul went to the south, took over all the south, and started the Gurkish Empire, and Bayaz stuck with the Union. You find out that they've been doing this and he's been controlling things for a long time, and that he's really been the mastermind behind everything. You find out that he's the one who had the king's son killed. He's the one who is actually behind this bank that was blackmailing Glokta and controlling what he was doing as well. And all he really wanted was to destroy Khalul and destroy the eaters that were his apprentices. He gets the seed, he's able to do that. He creates this huge tornado and like hurricane winds and just destroying the city in the process. And he doesn't care. All he cares about is his revenge. The seed ends up killing all kinds of people in the city. West dies of the sickness that it causes as well. And he once again doesn't care. And then you see, like I commented, Jaisal actually trying to be a little bit better, and Bayaz basically telling him, "You will do what I say, or I'll come back here and torture and kill you." And he threatens Glokta, make sure Glokta follows, and make sure that everything in the kingdom is going to go the way he wants it, so that he can continue playing his games and getting his revenge. All of that, I think, believable without the Ptolemy scene, but really shows you everything that he has been masterminding, which is satisfying and does fit the character, but does really show a lot of the little pieces here and there that had been put in. That I think was enough of a everything connects moment without trying to throw in some random plot twists that I just didn't feel like worked. It really did blend everything together with the book. Like I said, my main issue is it was just a little underwhelming. Some of the characters just kind of fizzled, and it seemed like maybe Abercrombie wasn't really sure how to tie everything together. For me, book two was the strongest book. Book one was very slow. Book two really picked up, and then book three just kind of slowed back down, winnowed down with some of the characters. Instead of getting them up to their ending, it just kind of fizzled in spots. Now, with that said, I really enjoyed the series. I did enjoy this book too. I will be reading the others. And it's more so just that I think there are flaws, and I'm going to talk about those. There were a lot of things that I did like as well, and I've tried to pepper that in as well to not make this seem like this really is a negative review when that is not the case. That said, this is take two because the first one went way, way too long. So I'm going to go ahead and end. Let me know your thoughts if you watch this. And if you did enjoy this review and want to see more reviews like this, please feel free to like and subscribe.